Hello, Net Ghosts. My name is Phantom, and on this episode of Running Cyberpunk Red, we're going to talk about enhancing combat encounters to make those memories at the table our players won't soon forget. When was the last time your players were genuinely excited at the end of a combat encounter? High fives were exchanged, you even got a few woos, and maybe even the coveted, hey, that was pretty awesome. I know that at my table we've had our fair share of these combat encounters that we still talk about to this day. Remember when I was holding off all of those mind-infected biodrones and you were at the bottom of the net and it was your last standoff, your last net action against the enemy demon at the bottom of the architecture, zapped them out of existence, they bursted into pixels, and then you collapsed, dying, and I had to make the choice between trying to heal you with my last speed heal or continuing to protect my own life against this horde of biodrones still slashing and tearing at my flesh. If you're like me, you want more stories like this at your table, but how do we get there? I think I've identified 3 strategies that we can use at our Cyberpunk tables to make combat more meaningful, adrenaline-fueled, and impactful. The first of these elements is threatening antagonists. By threatening antagonists, I mean a person or organization that has and is continuing to and threatening to hit the players where it really hurts. When you look at the hook section of the beats portion of the Cyberpunk core rulebook, which I haven't looked at yet, here's a little preview of that. We'll talk about that in another video, but please make sure you look at that before you are running your campaign. A lot of these hooks have to do with the bad guys doing horrible things to the people players care about, whether that is kidnapping them, targeting them, manipulating them, or straight up killing them. Let's say that your players are driving through the combat zone when all of a sudden they are, kind of like David Martinez and his mother, caught suddenly between a gang war between the Maelstrom gang and some Inquisitors. A group of Generation Red yo-gangers on motorized scooters and bikes begin aiding the players by taking out the remaining combatants. The players then are invited into Generation Red's home, an abandoned office building in the middle of the combat zone, and quickly they make allies. One of the kids calls up the players about a week later and tells them that they had spotted over the past few days some Maelstrom gangers stalking the nearby rooftops, but tonight they're beginning to amass in number, clenching their combat jaws and flexing their crafted muscles. The kids are pretty sure that they're about to attack any second, and just as the players are beginning to discuss amongst themselves what to do, they hear screams, the sound of doors being torn open, and the line cuts. The bottom line here again is it should always be personal. The players should care about the reasons that they're fighting when they're fighting. As the players are gaining rep and influence in the city, they're also going to be amassing in number enemies. This brings us to our second strategy for making combat unforgettable. Fight dirty but fair. As a GM, you have the privilege of getting to roleplay in your own way too. What I mean by this is get in the heads of the player's opposition. I really mean it. Pretend that you are these bad guys. Your enemy factions should feel distinctly dangerous, and they shouldn't act homogeneously. Every faction has a different way of taking out their opposition in Night City. Think of it as kind of a Darwinian survival of the fittest situation. All of these factions in Night City have evolved their own ways to survive. All of them in their own way insidious, malicious, and frightening. The players are scrapping with some animals. Have the animals use the full breadth of those brawling mechanics. Have them grabbing players, using them as human shields, choking them, and throwing them through concrete. These are animals after all, and these are the things that make them terrifying. Their idea of a good time is hitting up the synth coke, juicing up on a dozen other drugs, and then staying in the gym for 28 hours straight. If the players are being targeted by Arasaka assassins, have them flush the corridors of the building with smoke grenades and with their infrared low-light UV vision begin pouring into the hallways, slicing through the players like ribbons with their monokatanas. If your players have pissed off a corporation, have them hire heavily armed corporate mercenary contractors. Have them crash in through the glass roof, drop down ropes from their gyrocopters, deploy riot shields and submachine guns, and surround the players in a continually enclosing ring. All the while, as the players are being pressed, snipers still up in the gyrocopters are lining up their scopes, and there's a net runner nearby who is sending in the drones. Enemies aren't just mindless bots in combat. They aren't just the NPC of the week. These are distinct people and factions in Night City that have their own strategies that they'll employ against their players, their own mindsets and tactics when it comes to combat, and they should feel that way. To add to this realism, when the bad guys finally realize that they're down on their luck, they're the last man standing, or they are finally outnumbered, have them actually attempt to flee combat or beg for their lives. This, again, can add some interesting drama as your players decide who is worth sparing and who just gets led to the head. Of course, players can also use this opportunity to exercise their social skills, such as interrogation, to get meaningful and useful information out of these combatants, and that, again, can just set up your very next beat. And finally, be unpredictable. Your players should begin to get a sense at your table that dangers and threats are ever present, that iron at the back of your head could be around the next corner. It's also okay to present your players with threats that are truly deadly, as long as it is earned in the context of the story that you are telling, and as long as it's not every single combat. As Maximum Mike reminds us in the core rulebook, we have to play for keeps. Make sure that your player characters get surprised by situations where old enemies that they put to back of mind a long time ago suddenly emerge to settle the score. Presumed allies suddenly are the one in the alley putting a blade to their neck, or when your players missed a few of the clues and hints that you tried to put along their path, they may end up in hotter water that they prepared for. It's okay for your players to have to flee an engagement once in a while. The general idea here is that when your players start on the back foot, but succeed anyway, that is pretty much a guaranteed way to make sure that your combat feels even more visceral and satisfying. But most of the time, we want to make sure that your players' victories in combat feel sincerely earned, and you want them to feel like they have genuinely achieved something by staying alive. After all, in Night City, you aren't trying to save the world, you're trying to save yourself. To wrap things up, we have 3 strategies that we want to employ. We want threatening antagonists. We want them to have punchable faces. We want the players to hate them. The easiest way to achieve this is by making sure that you are in the head of your antagonists, actively working against the players' interests and taking away the things that they love. Make sure that your players are experiencing that. The more rep they gain, the more important they get in Night City, the more enemies that they have, and the more dangerous the city feels. We also want to make sure that we are fighting dirty but fair. You still want to observe combat balance, and that will be a subject for another video. And finally, don't give your players room to breathe. Be unpredictable. Make sure they never feel truly safe. Don't let their bad guys forget to settle the score. Put your players on the back foot. Make them taste death, and they will savor all the more the next time that they get to return to their shitty cargo conapt and rest a night alive in Night City. If you found this video useful and enjoyable, make sure you do the thing. Down in the comments below, maybe share with us a story of an unforgettable combat you had at your table and what you and your players did to facilitate creating this awesome memory. And with that, until next time, I've been Phantom. Stay safe out there on those mean streets of Night City. I will see you next time.